Well, good morning, Pastor Larry. Thanks for setting in for Pastor Brandon this morning.
Thank you, Pastor Joel. It is an honor to be in here.
Well, it was a good day at Hopewell yesterday.
An amazing day. It's always a great day to be at Hopewell,
Yeah.
and just to be able to get together and worship and spend time with all the people, to see them milling around the lobby and laughing and just having a great time being here. It's a great place.
You know what? One of the things I love to see happen is weekly you get to see the Holy Spirit just bring everything together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I know it probably looks like we program all that stuff, but he's the programmer,
Right?
And it was really neat to see that happen again yesterday.
Yeah, we get that comment all the time. Does all the departments to get together and talk and plan out every single thing? No, God does.
No, God does. God
puts that in everybody's heart.
So you probably got some mission trips coming up.
I do. I actually have. I used to say I don't have my next trip till way over in July, and then I realized it is July. So I mean, July is like the end of the week. So I actually have. We have a student trip going to Honduras on the 12th of July,
right?
And then I'll leave that to go down to the same location on the 19th of July with a team in Honduras. We're really blessed this year. We're going to be working at the same school, in the same community, at the same church. And so our students will go down and start a lot of the projects, and then the team I take down will go down will hopefully finish all the projects. So we'll see. I kind of have almost a whole construction team traveling with me, so we should be able to accomplish a lot. So but the biggest thing is being able to be back in the school. We've been there for the last 3 years, and so we built up some major relationships up with the kids there.
Yeah,
so, and then August. Hey, you'll be with me in Peru. So, right before we blink, it'll be August.
So the two trips coming up in July, are y'all like going to pass each other in the airport?
We actually are. We will be getting off the airplane that the students will be getting on. So
no way.
So we'll be able to wave at them in the window as we go down the concourse. So
that's cool.
It's pretty cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. So they will look exhausted from working. We'll look exhausted from being up since 3 o'clock in the morning. So yeah.
And then, of course, everything that's happening down there, that ties into the mission project with Adventure Camp, right?
Absolutely. I think that's been incredible. We've been able to do that the last few years is the kids that are here and the kids that are there, we'll all be teaching the same lessons. The kids that are here will actually be raising money for the project that we're doing in Honduras. So
that's super cool.
We'll be sending videos back every day of the progress and letting them see the children, meet the children, see the sites at the church and the school, and so that's been really fun over the last few years to be able to connect our church and the community down there as well, and the kids get really, really excited about seeing what's happening.
You know, it's one of the things that I love about being on the mission field is it brings such a better perspective on how blessed we are here in this country. And because sadly, particularly like when we went to Malawi a couple of years ago, you know, you go to a country like that and you see people that, from our perspective, are suffering every single day. And yet, they have so much joy in their life, and then you come home and you see people riding around in a Lamborghini that just look miserable. Yeah,
you especially in Malawi, we saw you take somebody and give them a plastic cup and
or an empty water bottle.
Yeah, they chase you down for an empty water bottle, but it was like you were giving them not a plastic cup, you were giving them a golden cup.
Right.
You know, and they would be so thankful and so appreciative of what you were giving them. And here we'd have thrown it in a garbage can. It would have just been disposable, but there it was going to be a vital resource to their life. And, you know, it's just, it's sad because I wish so many more people could get the impression of what they need to really be thankful for.
Right.
As I've traveled all these years, the one constant I've seen is that stuff doesn't make you happy. And here in the States, we try to buy enough stuff to make ourselves happy.
Yeah.
It's never going to work. So they're happy just because they have Jesus.
Yeah.
They're happy because they have a relationship with Christ. They're happy because they get to worship God. And here we're just focused on stuff.
Right.
And thankfully we do have a good church that focuses on worship though. But lots of great people here. But
and that perspective of finding your joy in the Lord, that's really what our text from yesterday was trying to teach us.
Yeah.
You know, I think I've been through seasons in my life. I'm sure you have too, where whatever God was doing just didn't make sense to me at all. Now, most of that I can look back on now, and hindsight's 20/20, and you get a little new flavor of, oh, okay, I think I'm beginning to understand what God was doing. But in the moment, it's just hard. It's just painful, and there's so much confusion. So, thinking about what Habakkuk was dealing with, and some of the things that you've walked through in your life, how do you maintain faith when life gets hard?
I think for one of the things, it's just not. I don't know the end result. God does.
Right.
And so often we get caught up in living in the moment, and all we're worried about is that moment and why are we suffering in that moment. But we don't realize that because we're suffering in that moment, God's teaching us something we're going to be able to use in the future. And so He's building us, He's refining us, He's given us the tools and resources we need for something that's coming. And we don't see that in the moment. We don't ever want to be in hardship. We don't want to ever have to suffer. But sometimes suffering is not necessarily a bad thing. I don't wish suffering on my family. But through suffering, we've seen a lot of growth. We've seen a lot of change. And that's not a bad thing. So, God needed the changes, and the way He decided to change us was through some suffering. And that's happened. So,
and I think we have to be careful in the way that we speak about how that suffering comes into our life. God doesn't cause everything, but what He doesn't cause, He allows.
Right.
And so, that verse in Romans 8:28, and Pastor Brandon's talked about it a lot lately too, is, that God causes all things to work together for good. That's the cause. And I'm not sure if this is the right word to attach to it, but it almost seems to me like that is an idea of what redemption can be. When you think about the pain that you walk through in life, for God to be able to redeem that and use it for good, that seems to be kind of what that verse is getting at. That it's not good. It doesn't feel good. I don't want to go through it again, but yet I can look back on things and see how God worked it for good.
Yeah.
You seen things like that happen?
Well, I watched as I was growing up. My family owned a little store and a garage, and my dad worked on cars, and we got to a place in life where because of circumstances they had to shut the business down. We didn't know what was going to happen. I'm a teenager. I'm thinking the life's going to end because now my parents, neither one of them have jobs, and what ended up happening was through that God allowed my dad to go to work for the state. He allowed my mom to go to work for a business in Lancaster, and where they would have worked until they died. God allowed them both to have retirement and benefits, and ended up being that God knew my dad was going to get cancer.
Yeah.
God knew my dad needed really good insurance. Wow. And so my dad ended up with really great insurance that actually took care of all his cancer treatments for 15 years. And otherwise he wouldn't have been able to work, and we really wouldn't have had any income. But God blessed him, but we didn't see it at the time.
Yeah.
So, but you go through times in life where you question God, and it's okay to do that. Why are you doing this? Why are we going through this? But so often you look back and you go, I get it now. Yeah. And unfortunately we should be able to be at that moment earlier in our walk. But so often we want to see the reward before we go, oh, thanks God.
Yeah.
Where we should be saying, oh, thanks God for taking me through it anyway. Because no matter what we're going through, we're not going through it alone. And, a lot of times people feel like they're out there on an island all by themselves. No, you're not. God's there with you. God's carrying you through. God's what is actually getting you through those difficult circumstances that you're being confronted with.
Yeah.
And there is a test of faith. That's not a bad thing. It strengthens us. It allows us to see where we need to shore up our own spiritual life. But it also encourages us as we get through the other side, because then we look back and go, okay, God, you were there through every single moment of that suffering.
Right.
And thank you. Thank you for being there.
Yeah. I think one of the most powerful things that I've learned, well, I hope I've learned it. If not, I'm relearning it. That God is not so much interested in what we are doing as what we are becoming.
Mm.
You know, it's not what I'm accomplishing or what I'm not accomplishing, or what my title is or what my title is not.
Yeah.
How many degrees I have. It's not that he's unconcerned about those things, but he's far more concerned about what we're becoming, the person we're becoming,
who we really are.
Yeah.
I think Pastor Brandon used the analogy a few weeks ago, but just, when you squeeze us, what comes out?
The sponge, right?
Yeah. The whole sponge analogy is what comes out. Is it what glorifies God, or is what's coming out? Is it glorifying the world?
Right.
And so, if we're going through those difficult times and we get squeezed, do people see Jesus during that time in our life, or do they see us revert back to the world and be worldly during those times of strife and stress and pressure? Hopefully it'll be Christ they see.
Yeah. One of the things that I think Habakkuk struggled with so much, if I'm reading his prophecy correctly, he seemed to really struggle with the fact that God was going to use these bloodthirsty Babylonians, as a tool in his hand. And the fact that God would use a wicked and evil nation when he could do it any way he wants,
right?
That is a little baffling. How do you reconcile that kind of thing?
I don't know that it is much a reconciliation as it is going. God's done this throughout the whole Scripture. Yeah, I mean we've seen it from him allowing Satan in the garden all the way through. We watch through all the way through when Christ is crucified, and you see all the Bible stories in between with the Israelites and with Moses and with Nebuchadnezzar, and all these evil rulers, and then God comes in and He is glorified through everything that takes place. And again, I think it's because we're in the moment. We're thinking of how this suffering is destroying our life in the moment, how we're seeing that the hurt and the pain in the moment, but we don't get to see the big picture. We're only seeing that one little dot in the middle of a big, massive canvas. Yeah. And but it's what's affecting us, and so that's what bothers us the most. Is that's what's affecting us. And we see. And I say canvas, so let me just go there. We see the canvas, we always see it from the front. We don't ever see what's happening behind it. Right. And I think that's kind of where God's at. God's there. God's always there. He's that main canvas that everything's put on, and He is allowing this beautiful painting to take place. Yeah. And it's a matter of just waiting till it's complete. And it won't be complete until Jesus returns. Right. And then we'll see. So reconciling it, I don't know that I reconcile. We live in a sinful world with sinful problems and sinful issues. We're in this world. We're going to deal with this world until Jesus calls us home. Right. And that's where we'll find a perfect place. Yep. I think about how hard it is for people to go through different circumstances. But then I also think if things were perfect here and we didn't have problems to go through, people wouldn't seek after that perfect place, right? That they will find in Jesus Christ. Yeah. And so often we got to remember it's not going to be perfect here. We're waiting for that place where it will be, and we won't have those problems, and we won't have that pressure from the world, because we'll be finally removed from the world and put in that beautiful, peaceful, perfect place with God Himself.
I think it was C.S. Lewis. I won't get this quote exactly right, but he says, that if we find within ourselves desires that cannot be fulfilled in this world, then that either means that God is very capricious and He's just toying with us, or we weren't made for this world. And I think keeping that perspective in mind, that not to diminish the importance of this chapter of our life, but this is really just a dress rehearsal and a job interview, right? For what's coming in eternity.
Yeah, and I think eternity is a hard concept for people to wrap their head around. I mean, it's a hard concept for me to wrap my head around, but even in the moment that we're living in is just a speck
Mm-hmm.
in all of eternity. And so even though we were going through a momentary turmoil, we got an eternity of peace.
Yeah.
And so, we may suffer a little bit, but we got an eternity of peace coming, and we just have to wait it out.
Yep.
And for us, it seems like a long time. To God, it's a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
So, we'll be there.
Yeah. I think over the course of my walk with Christ, and particularly in a teaching kind of ministry, I think I've been through the book of Habakkuk twice systematically.
Mm-hmm.
This paragraph and this paragraph. And one of the things that I really missed in studying it up until this past week, by looking at it as all one glimpse, is really what he says going into that beautiful passage in 17 through 19, where he talks about, even though the fruit fails, even though the crops fail. If you read that verse in isolation, it's just amazing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so uplifting. But when you tie it into the full context, the thing that jumped out at me was he's saying that in spite of what he knows is coming.
Mm-hmm.
God has told him Babylonians are coming. God has told him that I've ordained them as an instrument of judgment. There's no getting around it.
Yeah.
That is his future. And yet, in spite of what he knows is coming,
Mm-hmm.
he says that beautiful prayer and commitment in verse 17. And that was just, that was something God was teaching me, that even if our circumstances don't improve, even if our circumstances stay the same or get worse, that doesn't change God's value
Right.
and his glory and the fact that he's still deserving of our worship.
Absolutely.
And you think about some of the countries that you've been to, and some of the things that the people that you know and love in these places that are waking up in third world countries,
Mm-hmm.
and their situation is not going to improve. The folks that you're close to in Haiti, for example, there's not a lot of hope that their immediate circumstances are going to get better, and yet some of the most joyful people you could ever meet.
Absolutely.
I think there's so much there that they could teach us.
Right.
But how do we wrestle with that?
I think a lot of that's mindset. We every time we go on a mission trip, we have debriefings at night, and one of the things I try to get our people to do is, I want you to look for your God moments throughout the day.
Right. Yeah.
And as we talk about those in the evening, at first people are kind of like, okay, I really don't know what you're talking about. But then as you're literally pulling out every little thing that God has done for you throughout that day, you begin to start to look for them because, okay, Larry's going to ask me about this tonight. I need to see where God's moving. I need to know what God's doing in my life. But if we do that when we get back here, and we do that every day, instead of looking for the bad circumstances, the hardships that are going to come, we start looking for how God's moving in and amidst those hardships and those circumstances. And then we start focusing more on God than we are on the circumstances.
Right.
So now the circumstances aren't what's controlling our mood, our attitude, our actions. It's God. And then that brings more joy. That brings more peace because, again, we're in the circumstances either way.
Yeah.
How are we going to face them? We face them knowing that we can be there in the midst of them with God. And then we worship God because he's there. And it's not that he has to do anything for us, but he's there. And that's all we really need is that he's enough. We need to recognize he's enough. And we just need to love him and show him that he's enough by worshiping him.
Yeah.
And so I think that's with Habakkuk, that's where he was at. I know this is coming. I know this is going to be a bad situation, but my God's not changing.
Right.
My God is my God, and he's going to stay the same for eternity.
Yeah.
And that's what we got to hold on to.
Yeah.
God's God.
Peace in spite of the chaos.
Absolutely.
Well, Pastor Larry, thanks for sitting down with us and talking
Absolutely.
through this today.
Well, it was a pleasure. Look forward to it.
All right.